Hey!
Happy Thursday, everybody.
Yeah, we're back live. Sorry, we had planned on doing a lot of live shows, but then our last guest was not able to do a live show. So we pre-recorded again after being away for so long. So
We've missed you guys, though.
yeah.
Yep, that's
Yep.
it. Yep. So lots happened again today. And much like we had predicted almost a year ago, Mark Carney announced his bid for the Liberal leadership.
Right. So now we're calling his bid for the North American Union. So we're on a roll here. We're feeling cocky.
Not that we want to be cocky, and not that we're cheering him on by any means. In fact, that's another one I would have been very, very happy to be wrong on.
Yeah, Luciferian troll. Not really my first pick, but whatever. Yeah, so you can go to any talk show right now and you can listen to the election. You can listen to the bid. You can talk about proroguing. We were going to talk about proroguing tonight. We thought, everybody's going to talk about proroguing, and sure enough, they're talking about proroguing. So, if that is what you're looking for, this is not the place. And I'm going to be counterintuitive and counterproductive and say, go elsewhere if that's where you want to look for that stuff.
Don't go elsewhere. Stick around, because we're talking about something that nobody else is talking about right now. Much like we were talking about Mark Carney a year ago. We were talking about carbon colonization a year ago. We talked about human biodigital convergence like 2.5 years ago. All these subjects are now coming around and are really quite popular right at this moment in time. Well, we're going to introduce you to another subject that isn't popular right now, but I'm sure 6 months to a year from now will be very, very popular. But just know you heard it here. Hopefully first. Maybe there's other people covering it, but nobody that we're aware of.
We're not looking at the elections. I mean, you can get coverage on that anywhere. This is what we try to do often is try to not just educate, but try to say, here are the biggest concerns for us. As we see it, and the things that usually slide under the radar are the biggest concerns for us. And today that is water. And we should have said it. We saw carbon pricing come in.
We did.
We saw carbon taxes come on, and the reason they do carbon taxing is so that there is a value that has attached to air, which otherwise had no value. So now all these green energy investments, Mark Carney, are actually valuable, and they're going to do the same thing with water. And that's concerning because we have a carbon credit score coming. We have carbon footprints, and you have to be under the carbon footprint. So not only do you have carbon restrictions coming, but you have carbon taxation. We're going to have water restriction coming and water taxation. And people think we're already taxed on water, but we're not. We're taxed on infrastructure for water. So it isn't, you just pay for water services. And I guess Toronto almost implemented a rain tax.
Yeah, they were talking about it. Miss Olivia Chow. Kudos to her. She's following that C40 agenda right on cue. Thankfully, some of her councillors are not following that agenda. And I believe the water tax or the rain tax was voted down. But we also know that the C40 agenda is asking people to register their gardens and their hobby farms. There's a reason for that. And it's connected to the water. And that is all part of the C40 agenda. It's part of the UN agenda, and it's part of the World Bank agenda. And you are going to hear all about it tonight.
What's rule number one, though? Just going back on that. Rule number one, never register. Registration leads to cattle cars. Never register. Ever. Don't register.
Don't register.
Yeah. I mean, and we watched that leaked Bonnie Henny video where Tam and Henry were talking about the avian
the chickens.
flu.
That's right.
And they said, we can't get farmers to register their farms due to mistrust in the government. And they said it. I'm like, finally, my heart was doing good because the farmers were too smart for them.
But then they said, but don't worry, we'll figure out a way to incentivize it. And force them to register.
Yeah, we'll just get their wastewater and yeah. So anyway, so water is the thing, and water is the most important resource in life, and of course they're going to want to control it because they are doing a war, and a war means that they kill the supply line, and they're going after the money hard, but they're also going after food, and of course they're going to go after water because that is the biggest control point they have.
And if they own all the other choke points, why not this one too?
You would think the World Economic Forum would have something to say about it.
You would think.
Well, and they actually do. So apparently the world is running out of water.
Oh no,
Oh, no.
Because that's what the World Economic Forum does. Those globalist predators they are. They like to tell us there's a problem. In case you didn't notice, there's a problem. We
Right.
didn't think of it ourselves. There really is a problem. But don't worry, we're going to tell you about the problem. In fact, it's probably a problem we created ourselves, hence why we can tell you about it. And then we're going to solve it for you.
Yeah, so that's the thing. The UN and the World Economic Forum and so many other people will tell you that they're solving problems. They're solving wastewater management problems. They're solving water waste problems. They're solving clean water for people because water is a human right. That's what they're saying. That's what you're going to hear. So that's what you're going to believe. But in behind the scenes, they're doing something very different.
But also they're solving climate change with water.
Mm-hmm.
They're solving genital mutilation with water. They're solving violent rapes with water and crimes against women and vulnerable minorities with water.
Well, so, wow, that we're going to have to unpack some of that, I'm sure. You're talking about a lot of stuff that's due to tribalism in third world countries, such as Africa and the Middle East, countries that are usually feudal by nature. And they're saying that is because they're fighting over water. So we have to manage water better. This is stuff that's been going on for centuries, and now it is due to water. Now, here's the same thing that they used to introduce the League of Nations in the beginning. Mm-hmm. They entered into World War I and said, in order to stop war, we need a global government. So League of Nations didn't take, so they tried it again with World War II, and that's where we got the UN. And now they're doing it with, water is causing wars. So we need to control water. We need global governments to control water.
But they were also saying they had one report that said 88% of the migration issues is due to violent and conflicts, war in those areas. But then it also said, never mind that, year over year, what was the wording they use? the word has escaped my mind just as I want to say it. But then they are saying, no, it's their infrastructure around water that is causing people to leave. Year over year, those numbers are increasing, the migration patterns, versus conflict and violent outbursts in their area, that it's really the water that is now the number one concern for illegal immigrants or migrant immigrants or refugees. It's because of lack of water that people are leaving, not because these areas are full of conflict and war.
Right. No, just aside, where are we getting all this stuff? We just pulling it randomly out of our butts? Nope. We have all of the reference links on the Rumble description on our Rumble channel. So just look that up there. May as well just, smash that subscribe button while you're there. So all of the relevant links are in that Rumble description. And we're not even going to scratch the surface.
No.
And here's why. It's not because we're not working hard to do the research. It's because they've been setting up this global infrastructure for decades.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, at least since the UN's been around. And it is so vast. We can't even begin to tell you how many companies and organizations are involved. We can tell you a few of them. Here they are there. Some United Nations companies, organizations are there. It actually is all of them. We just didn't list them all up.
Every time we read something else, it was like, oh, wait a minute. Here's another committee or organization. Oh, but wait, there's 6 more attached to that organization that our taxpayer dollars are actually paying for.
Right. Now, to be fair, they are doing good things. Now, I don't know what they're doing with those good things to build up infrastructure and control.
They're creating jobs.
They are creating jobs. They are bringing clean water
jobs
to a lot of people. They're doing good things. So I don't want to minimize that. There are a lot of good people in the UN who are not aware of the global stuff. They're doing good things around the world. So I don't want to just completely diss everything. What we're looking at is the future trends. Are they going to use this to control us down the road? Our answer is yes.
And are they doing enough good with the billions of dollars that they collect from us taxpayers each and every year? Chris actually did the math. No, they're not.
I did some math. I'll get there. Yeah. So the first things first is to understand that globalists have their own language. When they say one thing, they actually mean another thing, like peace means no resistance, that sort of thing. And then one example, just to start us off with that, is democracy. Democracy is a code word for liberal ideology. It's a derivative of democratic. So the liberals and the Democrats, virtually, when they say democracy and rule of law, that means their ideology and their control. That's what that means. And just in case you don't believe me, there is the CIC, which is a sister company to another organization. So it goes RCMP, CSIS, and then there are governing bodies that oversee.
Such as the Five Eyes.
Well, but in Canada, there's the governing bodies that oversee CSIS. And so they're not the highest authority. There's a governing body that is made up of parliamentarians. And then there's an NGO that pretends to be just a consulting think tank, but it's heavily funded by militaries around the world. And so the CIC, the Council of International something, they put out this thing not too long ago, and it says the global rise of illiberalism threatens democracy everywhere. And that's all you need to know. Democracy is, it's a code word for Democrats and liberals and whatnot. So when they say sustainable goals, what they mean is controlling you through consumerism. And that's it. They got to get everybody into the consumerism wheel to make these sustainable goals work. Water security means under our control. So security means they're securing it. And then we can just sort of go from there. You can kind of springboard off that.
And sustainable doesn't always mean sustainable in the way that you and I would think, which means, oh, it'll last forever. No. When they talk about sustainable or fair and equitable practices, they don't mean bringing the poor up. They mean bringing the haves down.
Right.
Now it's fair and equitable. Now it's sustainable. It's not about lifting people up. It's about lowering people's standards to the absolute basic needs.
Right.
Or necessities, as they say. And their definition of necessities probably is not the same as your definition of necessities.
Right. So now, does that mean, so what we're asking really is, are they about to initiate global taxation and global control on water? And we just have to look at the past. Well, have they done that with carbon? Have they been able to tax air?
Yes.
Yes. Have they been able to say you can only use this much air?
Yes.
Yes, they haven't enforced it yet, but that system is in place already and it's coming. So a few quotes to get us started here. Climate change increases the risk of conflict as people compete for scarce resources, including water, climate resilient land, and possibly energy. The risk of intra and interstate conflict increases. This is especially true in fragile states where a climatic event such as a drought or flash flood can aggravate tensions and lead to a breakdown of the rule of law. That's Mark Carney.
Our incoming PM.
Yeah, in his book Values, if you want to know what's going on and what you can expect from this new prime minister, read Values, because it lays out how they're going to use climate change as a scam. And then if you really want further research on that, go to Friends of Science. They've covered Mark Carney and how he uses false data to push his agenda.
It's 600 pages, well worth the read.
I haven't read it yet. I've read parts of it. I've read 4 pages.
To beat your enemy, you got to know your enemy.
Yeah.
Read those 600 pages.
Yeah. We'll see you next year on the next show. The Canada Water Act of Canada, Section 5D, they want to formulate comprehensive water resource management plans, including detailed estimates of the cost of the implementation of those plans and the revenue and other benefits likely to be realized from the implementation thereof. So that would indicate what? Taxing.
Taxing.
That's right.
Of course, taxing.
And then finally, the FAO, which is the UN
Food and Agricultural Organization.
Correct. So they're going to be very much in line with Bill 263.
Yes.
Water accounting. Water accounting is the systematic analysis of the current status and trends in water supply, demand distribution, accessibility, and use in time and space within specified domains, producing a basis for evidence-based water policy decision making. So they're tying the word accounting in there with water, and this is part of the point we're going to be making tonight. And
just so you know, they've already got the technology that currently is topically from satellites above monitoring how much each country, each state, each city, each village is using water-wise. They've already got their water calculator working, and you don't even know about it. And the technology is called WOPAR, WOPAR. I think yes, I did, but I got to change my glasses so I can see what that actually stands for. It stands for Water Productivity through Open Access of Remotely Sensed Derived Data.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, that's complete English.
Right?
Yeah.
But they're calling that responsible governance of water tenure, your water accounting system.
On top of that, they have sensors in the pipes now. They call it the Internet of Pipes. So they are monitoring flow and water quality and all that sort of stuff. And then they're also monitoring wastewater. They are testing wastewater regularly to look for flues or something. They're going to PCR test us into oblivion through wastewater as well. So they are completely monitoring. So if you think you can get away with using water over your allotted limit without repercussions, you are sorely mistaken.
That's right.
Now, but you say, no, I have a well, so that's okay. Wells will be regulated. And in the case of Argentina, which we've already seen, rain barrels are going to be regulated because you're messing with the water cycle, according to them at that point. But they don't mention the water cycle. That's the most incredible part. In grade 2, I learned about the water cycle, where water is, you know what? You want to learn about the water cycle?
Just play the video.
Yeah.
Let's look at the science of rain and how raindrops form. First, we'll need the sun. When the sun shines on water on the Earth's surface, the heat of the sun warms the water, turning it into an invisible gas called water vapor. This process, the changing of water into a gas, is called evaporation. Because gases are lighter than liquids, water vapor rises up into the sky. And the further you move up and away from the Earth's surface, the colder the temperature gets. So in the sky, the water vapor cools and changes back into tiny water droplets. This change is called condensation and is the opposite of evaporation. Clouds are made up of tiny water droplets, so when condensation occurs in the sky, clouds form and grow. Let's take a closer look. When water droplets bump into one another, they stick together and grow in size. They continue to grow until they are too heavy and fall as rain. They even grow as they bump into one another on their journey from the cloud to the ground. And every single raindrop that reaches the ground is made up of 1 million of the original tiny water droplets. Raindrops fall on the ground surface where the sun can shine on them, and the whole process happens again. This is called the water cycle and keeps water moving from the ground to the sky, providing the water needed for plants, animals, and people to survive. So now you know.
So
Don't mute us.
yeah, Michael's tired of hearing us. So that seemed like it was for kids. That's because it was for kids. I learned about this in grade 2, and they seem to have just shied away from this information now.
Well, now they're trying to say, or trying to convince you, because apparently you didn't go to school and apparently you don't remember this. You're too old to remember the water table and how water and precipitation and evaporation all works, to continuously make sure that our water is forever renewable and doesn't run out. And, you know, the FAO even says in their mandates that it's not about the delivery of water or not having enough water. It's about politics and the governance around the water. And therefore, we have to apply pressure on governing bodies to maintain and account for and audit the way that they use water.
Right. We'll talk about that too, is the evaporation, the groundwater evaporation and whatnot. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. Did you?
No, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, well, beautifully
That's
said.
the FAO's mandate, hence the reason for the water calculators.
Yeah, and so there's several branches of the UN that have their own sneaky little thing. They're part of the puzzle. So let's go back to this now. All the people involved. The one thing we didn't mention was down at the bottom there, over on the left on that logo, is the 2030 Water Resources Group, who are tied in with the World Bank Group. And this is the very thing, when I came across this is why I had red flags and I thought we should be doing this show, because they have tied water in with banking. And we know from doing our coverage of Marconi and the basal system that they're tying carbon in with banking. And so anything to do with valuable resources like air and water, and they're tying it into the banking system, that's a red flag for me.
Exactly. And we know that they brought in Basel IV. We know that Basel has been a system in place since the 1990s, but nobody was really enforcing it. Well, now the global predators are a little bit further ahead in their plans, a little bit further ahead in their technology, in their surveillance systems. So now they're bringing everything to fruition. And on top of that, they've brought the WHO in. So, you know, that pandemic preparedness bill that was sitting in our parliament, which, by the way, could possibly be brought back because it's a private member's bill after proroguement. But that bill also has to do with the WHO is also very much involved in the water resources scam that is going on right now that we're talking about tonight.
So imagine 263 is a USB port in the side of your computer. It is meant for all of those global plans to be slide right into that law. And so they can just take over globally, and this is getting concerning. And then water is on that list as well, the control of land and water. So that is getting really concerning. So going back to World Resources Group, they were started in 2008. The World Economic Forum joined forces with the International Finance Corporation, IFC, and the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. They formed an informal consortium that later became known as the 2030 Water Resources Group. By the end of 2009, 2030, WRG was incubated with the forum headquarters in Geneva, with its official launch in Davos in January 2010. When 2030 World Water Resource Group moved to the IFC, a more formal governance structure was created, composed of its highest governing body, the Governing Council, and the Steering Board during 2030 WRG's time at the IFC from 2012 to 2017. In 2017, the strategic decision was made to host 2030 WRG in the World Bank Water Global Practice from January 2018, and the World Right Group moved to the World Bank late 2017. The World Bank, in conjunction with the IFC and WRG, now finance and invest in water infrastructure globally. So that last line, they now finance and invest in water infrastructure globally. The big question to ask there is, why would a bank invest in water infrastructure if there is only one reason a bank would invest in something, and that is because they expect to see a return on that dollar? So how are they going to receive a return on that dollar? It's the same question as how would they receive a return on investing in solar energy or wind energy, because those had really no value until you attached a carbon tax. And now that air is taxable, now they can point to this thing will save you some carbon. This will save you some greenhouse gas effect. And so now all of a sudden, by taxing air, these green energies have a value. So what are they setting up based on that with the banks investing in water infrastructure? They expect to see a return.
They do. And water and carbon are going hand in hand, because they're saying, we got to get to net zero. Net zero means removing all of our fossil fuels. So what they're doing is they're pressing water as another resource that is needed in order to mine fossil fuels and to make fossil fuels work for us. And so therefore, the fossil fuels is the reason for our water shortage, and the reason for our climate change is because we don't have enough water that's going back into the water tables. Therefore, water is value. We need to get out of the fossil fuels. We need to get into solar and wind energy in order to save the world. And on top of that, water is life. And that is their campaign slogan that they're using. Water is life. So therefore, it is valuable because water gives life to everything. But on top of that, it gives life to the fossil fuels turning into energy, which then causes us to raise our carbon calculator numbers, which in turn causes carbon suffocation, which in turn kills life. Therefore, we need to put a tax on water, a tax on carbon, because people will not do that themselves, because people are a little bit smarter than what they think, because we understand how carbon works to give us life and how water also works to give us life, and how water is a renewable source that actually re-energizes itself all the time. But they don't want you to know that. So they are doing their damnedest with their propaganda to tell us that water causes violence, water causes genital mutilation, water causes starvation, water table is not renewable. And now we've got droughts and climate change and all this stuff affecting migrants going here, there, and everywhere. And water is also the big factor in our fossil fuels.
Right.
So much.
Right.
So many lies.
So water's infinite. It's causing wars. It is causing gender-based violence. It is causing underage girls to marry.
Forced childhood marriage. That was another one that they said water is causing.
It's all in there. It's all in those links. Go through the links and read that stuff. And that is like 1/10 of the stuff that we've gone through over this show. So the 2030 Water Resources Group so, well, sure, they're an entity, whatever, just like the UN. Is there any way I would have a red flag over that group? Yeah, here's their sponsors. Coca-Cola Company, Nestle is another one, World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates, they're right there. A whole bunch of other organizations we haven't heard as well. So, once Bill Gates involved,
it's bad.
Yeah, you got to keep an eye on it for sure. But back here, just bring that back up. And then Nestle is one of the sponsors. And if you go back to the history on all that, the CEO at the time of Nestle was the guy who founded the 2030 WRG. So being one of the founders, there's some history there, and that is this. Now, some people might remember the documentary "We Feed the World." This caused a huge brouhaha with the CEO of Nestle because this portion of the documentary went viral.
Ja, es gibt daher bei uns ein schönes Lied, Wasser braucht das liebe Vieh, Hollerei und Hollerie, wenn Sie sich erinnern können. Also Wasser ist natürlich das wichtigste Rohmaterial, das wir heute noch auf der Welt haben. Es geht darum, ob wir das normale Wasserversorgung der Bevölkerung privatisieren oder nicht. Und da gibt es zwei verschiedene Anschauungen. Die eine Anschauung, extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt, als Mensch sollten Sie einfach Recht haben, um Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung. Ja? Und die andere, die sagt, Wasser ist ein Lebensmittel, so wie jedes andere Lebensmittel, sollte das einen Marktwert haben. Ich persönlich glaube, es ist besser, man gibt einem Lebensmittel einen Wert, so dass wir alle bewusst sind, dass das etwas kostet, und dann anschließend versucht, dass man mehr spezifisch für diesen Teil der Bevölkerung, der keinen Zugang zu diesem Wasser hat, dass man dann dort etwas spezifischer eingreift, und da gibt es ja verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Also.
So he's saying that water is an extreme, or that humans have a right to water. That's an extremist view. He's saying that water should be priced like a foodstuff, and he coincidentally sells water as a foodstuff.
Coincidentally.
Right. So that is the best way to manage water. You've got to give it value so people know that their water is actually valuable. So a little history on that guy. He got raked over the coals for that, for saying that water isn't a human right, which is a basic thing that we've understood forever. And then he comes out and he says, they did this big press release, and Nestle's does he actually believe that it's a human right? Yes, our former chairman, the guy who started the World Water Resources Group, passionately believes the water is a human right. Everyone, everywhere in the world has the right to clean, safe water. His critics use a video interview that Peter gave in 2005 to claim that he thinks that water should be privatized. This is false, and then goes on to start this foundation that is hell-bent on controlling water
and putting value to water, and at the same time as he believes that this is a human right, he's also making policy saying fair and equitable necessity of water should happen. So what does fair and equitable mean when it comes to distribution of water?
Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't look like.
Please do.
And that is, Nestle is famous for sucking up water. So they deplete water resources all over the world so they can sell it as water bottles for people. So they make a huge profit off water, and he knows that water is free around the world. So they go in and they just suck the land dry, and then they move on. So Nestle moved to this company called Blue Triton, and they got shut down. The reason I put this up here is because they this is how much water they were taking out. It's reasonable to expect that Nestle was taking about the same. That's 638 million liters in 2023, 672 million liters in 2022. So that's about how much water they were pulling out of the ground to sell to people. And even though that's a new company, they bought it from Nestle, who was doing about the same kind of manufacturing. So we figured out Nestle is the largest global retailer of bottled water. And we figured out that in last year, they made 104 billion.
No, trillion.
Billion. 110
billion,
million dollars gross on water bottle sales. So that's how much water they sell. They have several water brands. So if you follow World Vision, they can create a well for $15,000, which means Nestle could have drilled 6,940,000 wells, or 6,940,000 wells globally. So they could have single-handedly solved the water crisis with their sales alone that they virtually stole from communities, a couple of them here in Canada.
Yes,
right?
Actually 10, 15 minutes down the road from us, they actually did that very same thing as they drained our water resources. I don't know if everybody remembers the Mill Street Water Company. I know Oprah several years ago was talking about that's the best water around. Yeah, those are natural spring wells, 10, 15 minutes from where we live. And Nestle, I believe the company was CJC Bottling that owned the property and was bottling Mill Street water. And Nestle came in and bought them out just for land value, because they don't pay for pulling the water resources out. So after paying for the land, they probably paid $600,000 to $1 million for it way back when. They're making profits of $104 billion.
Right.
So goes to show how profitable water is for them, that the same guy who says it's an extreme right view to think that everybody should be entitled inalienably to water. This is the same guy who is basically pulling water for free from Canadian lands on top of other lands and making billions of dollars off of it.
But here's the rub in that. You would automatically think, well, we need to then price them out of the market. So we need to put a price on water for them so they don't do this. So they're unable to do this, right? I mean, it's just a matter of saying no.
Correct.
To them. But a lot of people are arguing, well, you need to charge them then, so they're not making a profit. But the problem is then you get into the quagmire of actually charging for water, and that is a problem for us.
Correct. So what government has slowly been doing is saying, you, the people, own above the land, like the land, the dirt, the soil, the grass, the trees, but you don't own the air because they can carbon tax you on it, and you don't own the water resources underneath either, so that their NGOs and themselves can own it and then tax you on it later.
Right. So that's going to be a problem for wells. It's also going to be a problem for rain barrels, because even though they don't want you to know about the water table, those rain barrels capture water that will go back down into the groundwater and eventually evaporate up into the water cycle. So they don't want you to.
No. So if you're collecting water, then you're collecting in your rain barrel. You're now taking profits out of their pockets, because that's water that's not going back into the earth. It also negates you from having to buy their bottled water that they pulled for free out of the earth.
Right. So so they're going to get you. And if you're not sure if that's true, go watch The Corporation. And they did that all in Argentina. It caused a massive problem internally, like civil war problem. So it's not like it hasn't been done.
No, and I can tell you, living in a rural community, we're on a well, and I used to do real estate, or I still have my real estate registration, but back in, and I actually went through my cabinets to pull because I thought I saw it, but I wasn't sure. Sure enough, there are folders that I have dating back to 2003 talking about wells and decommissioning your wells, and how the water rights aren't necessarily yours. And then they've got you also talking about, because Chris was asking me, well, why would they tell you you have to decommission your well, or that you can't have your well? Well, the reason being that they were telling people back then is that you needed to decommission your well because your well being open was now contaminating that water vein, and now going down the line and contaminating everybody else down the line. So therefore, it was safer for you to decommission your well and go on municipal water that you now get charged for. Lo and behold, it's the infrastructure that you're getting charged for, is what they try to tell us. But at the same time, this is now what they're starting to do in rural communities. Try and convince you that municipal water that is full of all their chemicals and their junk that you have to pay for is far better and healthier for you, safe and effective. The safer propaganda that they like to put out. Therefore, decommission your well. So this is what's happening in rural communities, and it's been happening as long as I've been in real estate. So it is another way that the government can take money from you, or mandate that you shut down your well for the municipal water infrastructure.
Right. Now, we said we're not going to get into all the ways. We have covered like infinite times the way they lie about carbon taxes and green pricing and all that stuff. So we'll just go into the some of the lies about water. It doesn't even make sense. And I'm sure if you're a massive global scientist and you got a big brain, this will make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to us at all. We dug into these stats, and so this is the fate of global freshwater withdrawals, consumption, and wastewater production by major water use sector. So if you look here, the black and the big black and blue section that takes up most of that little pie, that is agriculture water consumption and agriculture drainage. Now, the green part, so basically the black part is how much water agriculture uses.
Consumes.
Let's
use their words. Because remember, words are very important, and they like to use words to confuse you about what they're doing.
Right. So the green 3% there, that's industrial. That's how much water industry uses. And the 3% there, that is how much local domestic and municipal water use is consumed. But agriculture, that's huge. And that would lead everybody to believe that agriculture is using up way too much water. If you look at the little chart down there on the right-hand side, we pulled that up from this. This is where the big picture was pulled from. These were the secondary stats on the actual source page. And they've got 70% is agriculture, 19% is industry, and 11% is municipal.
So that's the drainage, the wastewater, and the consumption all added together to give you the full picture.
Right.
And then the circle on the left is the breakdown picture by Aquastat, which, by the way, Aquastat is a UN organization, another arm of the UN. So conflict of interest in this study.
So the actual Aquastat page on the right-hand side, that is the bar chart that they use. So if you look at this very carefully, let's break this down. Agriculture looks like it uses so much water. But if you look over on the keys there, it says agriculture water consumption and then agriculture drainage, which means it goes back into the water table.
Exactly.
If you look at the other ones, you've got industrial water consumption and industrial wastewater, municipal water consumption and municipal wastewater. So unusable water, but agriculture drainage
actually goes back into the system.
So if you minus the two out, that means agriculture actually uses 6%. Because the rest of it goes back in. But you have to add up the other two numbers. So industry is actually 19% and municipal is actually 11%. But they want to show you that it's comparable. So they've still got agriculture at 70% when that's not an accurate picture. It's not wastewater. It's returned.
No, so if you actually did the real math on waste, then there's really only 6% of waste from agriculture, which means that 3% and 3% that they're telling you for municipal and industrial is actually far, far greater than what they're actually showing.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, Jody's not a scientist. I'm smart. Jody's not a scientist, but we could be both interpreting this wrong, correct?
We could be.
We could be, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because they've got industry at 3% water consumption. They're saying industry, which is nuclear cooling, which is Coca-Cola, which is also
textiles.
And textiles, which is dyes are used. They use a lot of water. Cleaning products, which are 90% water, shipped around the world. They're saying like all of industry is only 3%. And it is far less than agriculture. So this pie chart is meant to be read at a glance without much thought put into it. So they're trying to fudge the numbers along with, because we don't have enough water, young girls are getting raped by old men because they have to marry them. They're getting genitals mutilated. They're causing wars. So
they're being forced from their home.
Right. So what they're doing is they're creating evangelists for their cause. They're creating people who see this thing at a glance and say, agriculture, it's killing us. We got to cut down on food. We need crickets.
Yeah.
We're going to get crickets.
And to be fair, Chris showed me this diagram and he said, what is this telling you? So I read it and I'm like, oh, that's telling me that agriculture is the number one culprit of water usage. And then he goes, are you sure? And I looked at it a little bit closer, and then I noticed the words.
You noticed
drainage versus wastewater. Right. Drainage goes back into the water table, back into the system. Therefore, 38 minus 32 is 6%. So agriculture actually only consumes or wastes, however you want to use it, 6%.
Well, and that's not even a waste because it's going into a consumable product that
into
keeps
our food.
People alive. Whereas, you know what? You can wear white. If you are worried about the water supply, you can wear all white clothing without dyes. If you're worried about the water, you can stop drinking Coca-Cola or pop or beer
or
alcohol if you're worried about that. So it's deceptive, and we know that if you're deceptive on the face of it, the more you dig down, the more deceptive it's going to be, and we've proved that 1,000 times over. We did the show on carbon colonization where we broke down the studies that actually warranted a rebuttal from the government because we were onto them.
Exactly.
So they're doing it again with water. Thing. Yes, they got to create the crisis so they can price you and restrict you out of
and shame
existence.
You and make you feel guilty for having that drink of water or making you feel guilty for having that shower. That's what they're trying to do. And in fact, we found a water calculator that actually asked you all of those invasive questions. How long are your showers? How many times do you flush a toilet? How long do you wash your hands for? How many times a day do you do dishes? Do you use a dishwasher? How many loads of laundry you do? All of these invasive privacy questions just to make me feel bad about, oh my gosh, I am wasting so much water, because it broke it down at the end of it to how many gallons of water you're using per day or per week, per month, per year. And therefore, I am a waste on society, and that I should be better and I should be reusing, recycling our water and reducing the amount of consumption.
Right.
But they don't tell you all of that water you're using is actually being recycled back into the earth, because all of that water is drainage that I'm using. So it's going back into what you might want to call a gray water system and then back into the earth. It's being filtered naturally. If you're on a well and septic, it's being naturally filtered through the earth and coming back in, and obviously giving life to our trees and our land all around us. So it's very deceptive and plays on your emotions if you don't take the time to stop and think.
Right. So here are a couple warnings about water restrictions. California, very recently in the news, a lot of water restrictions. What happened there?
Oh,
Fires.
what happened there? They had fires. And guess
Right.
what? There was no water in the basins, no water in the hydrants. Insurance companies were canceling people's insurance for fire just 6 months ago. And now all of those people don't have homes.
Right. Now, more concerning also, though, in 2019, California had the most severe water restrictions in the
Yes.
United States, especially LA, I believe. And it was so bad to the point where you could choose between having a shower that day or doing your laundry that day. And, you know, flushing after every use was
Nope.
an absolute no-go. But more
Washing the feces
that's the more
off the
concerning thing.
sidewalk.
Their homeless problem is so bad in California that most store owners have to use a hose to spray off their front doorsteps from all the urine and feces from the homeless people every night. They couldn't do that anymore. So they did that just at the end of 2019, right before the pandemic. So what happens when you have limited water use and you can't clean and hygiene is lower? You have all these feces going around, and then you have a pandemic.
Massive bacteria growth, virus growth, whatever you want to call it. People get sick without
Right.
proper hygiene practices.
And the timing is very sus that they did all those restrictions right before the pandemic broke out. It was almost like a month before that started. I read a whole thing on it just before it happened. And then they were worried about sanitation at the time. And then the pandemic breaks out.
But not only that, we're seeing more and more governments conveniently not filling the water basins, not refilling the emergency water supplies, so that when droughts happen, and they know that they do, especially in certain longitudes, latitudes of our Earth. We know that there's dry weather spells. We know that droughts happen. Hence the reasons for all of these emergency basins and extra water overfills. And yet governments are cutting back. They're changing plans with the what do you call the system? The dam systems. They changed all the planning with the dam systems, how they work. They changed all the ideas of how to fill the basins and how many basins to keep filled versus not keep filled. Who is entitled to use water, such as golf courses, and who is not, such as farmers. So we're seeing more and more of these government decisions being made to make you believe that, oh my gosh, we have a water crisis.
Right.
But really, we have a governing crisis. We have an NGO crisis. We have a UN crisis who is looking out for their friends and their pocketbooks and not you and I.
No, we ran that story where golf courses were getting water and farmers had to not use the water. And so that was pretty concerning. These farmers fought back and I think they ended up winning. So just going back to here, there is another source of water consumption, and that is evaporation from ground. So they actually, Aquastat actually went out of their way to say that we do not include that in the source. So those stats aren't even accurate because there's another form of water consumption was the fourth one, and that is returning back into the water table. So those aren't even accurate stats. And if they're not including that, then that's why they're including farms as water consumption and water waste. And even though they call it drainage. So there's that. Now going back to one other thing here, I think it's the IISD. And these ones down in the middle, these logos down in the middle, the IISD, IGRAC, World Water Council, those are all municipal level organizations. But just like the C40 cities and the mayors, the union of city mayors around the globe, they all get together and they agree on how water consumption should happen. And they haven't put anything in place where they're restricting it from people yet, except for California. But one of those, curiously enough, is a conglomerate of conference centers.
Yes.
Which was really weird. And we were trying to figure out back and forth. So this is wildly speculative. There's not based on fact at all. No. But our speculation on that is that these are global hubs. And if they are cracking down on water there and encouraging people to use like hand sanitizer instead, that sort of kills the immune system. So it's almost as if they're encouraging more global
Disease.
pandemics, because these are global hubs. People fly in and they do these conferences and they fly out. And if they're discouraging people from washing with soap and water and encouraging like hand sanitizers, that's about the only thing we can figure. Like, why would these conference centers be so on board with water restrictions?
Like they're actual partners in
control.
sponsoring all of these types of things. And, you know, conference centers don't make money unless people come, but people come, and that seems to be super spreader
right, but
forums.
That's zero fact. That's an opinion that's highly speculative, which we don't often do on the show. But
no, so
it was very curious.
Yeah, so if you can figure out why conference or convention centers are involved in this planning, please give us a ring, send us an email as to if you know the reason why convention centers are involved in this. We would really love to have your
or comment on our Rumble video, our Rumble channel, comment there and get the discussion going, and smash that subscribe button while you're there, as well as the notification button. So
you want to know some of the policies that they're going to use?
No.
I'm going to give our viewers then, because I already told you these, so I know why you don't want to know. But there was 3 organizations that commented that I was able to locate anyway on policies that they felt could be used to roll out the water calculators, the water, resource, reuse, recycle program. So the IPBES, which is Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Sciences, these are their suggestions. And tell me if these sound familiar to you in perhaps other wording that, conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat wearers might actually know. So one was leveraging existing financing towards more green investments. Basel 4? Basel 4? Does that sound like Basel 4? Expanding innovative financing mechanisms. Does that sound like CBDCs? Creating regulatory and legal enabling environments that support rather than constrain NBS investments. And NBS investments is nature-based solution investments. Again, Basel 4. Intersectoral collaboration in harmonizing policy domains. One World Government, Pandemic Preparedness Acts, perhaps all of those. And more rigorous assessments and evaluations, which would be your water calculator, much like your carbon calculator, or water taxes, if you so like. The IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, their whole thing was methodology using a set of common indicators. And their common indicators that they feel that should be monitored, tracked, and traced are societal challenges, design at scale, biodiversity not gain, economic feasibility, inclusive governance, balancing trade-offs. Again, goes back to the haves, giving to the have-nots so that everybody's fair and equitable, adaptive management and sustainability and mainstreaming. And of course, the World Bank. Where would we be without the World Bank? They had their own solutions. They believe that more government policies should be in place, and those policies, first policy should include inclusive decision-making, the strengthening of land tenure and resource rights, accountability and transparency, upholding the rights of Indigenous peoples, gender equality and women empowerment, and improved coordination with countries. Not sure how that all chalks up to water recycling, reusing, resource saving, but they believe that inclusivity, women empowerment should be part of our water plan.
Of course.
Next one was improve natural resource management through protected areas. Protected areas. Post-conflict rebuilding, sustainable land and water management, standards and safeguards, and greening of military and humanitarian operations. Again, how this all relates to our water, I'm not 100% sure, but they didn't really say a whole lot of anything there. Protect nature in conflict areas through international agreements and enforcement obligations from international court hearings. So they want to bring the law into enforcing agreements that enforce you and I on how we manage our water or use our water. And then the last one that they had was transboundary resource management and agreements, including water diplomacy and parks for peace. Again, that goes back to Bill C-293, the Pandemic Preparedness Act. And actually, I looked at what our government had in this session of our government for water bills, and hokey doodles, there was probably about 30 or more bills that were presented that all had to do with water resources.
Right.
I don't think that's a coincidence, folks.
No, it's going to be a pretty big control point. If money isn't the leverage for you, if food isn't the leverage for you, if housing isn't the leverage for you, water is absolutely the leverage for everyone.
Definitely. And now the only question we were left with, I think we're at this part, yes?
But
the only question that we are left with is why? Why do they want to control our air? Why do they want to control our water? Why do they feel it is not an inalienable right that we're all entitled to? In fact, they think it's an extreme right ideology for us to think that everybody should be entitled to breathe in air and have clean water to drink. Money, 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 says Luann. I got another theory.
Yeah, it's always coming back to this now. We're trying to just hone it down to, who's running the world and why they're doing it. And we are just honing it into the one problem.
We are. And, I decided, I'm going to Google why is this such an issue? And I was having a shower and
hot flash?
Not a hot flash. I know that looks like hot flash.
Personal
no.
summer.
But I was standing having a shower and I was thinking, like, why are they doing this? And it came to me, water is life.
Yep.
And who else said water is life? Oh, Jesus.
It's always the answer.
John 4:10-26, there's a whole chapter on water being life and drinking in God through water. And, Christ did not present himself as living water, but he said he would give them living water. Life is water. Water is God. Another person said it is an outward visible sign that calls to mind the fact that there is no life if there is no water, and there is no water if there is no God. God gave us water as the most prolific source through which to turn our minds to God. And I'm like, all these predators definitely believe in God. And we know all of their plans seem to be with regards to tearing down God, destroying God's creations. So maybe that's what this is really about. Water is life. And as I said near the beginning of this, their whole thing right now, their whole campaign is called Water is Life. Water is food. They have a 1.5 minute video on YouTube. If you Google Water is Life, you'll see their YouTube video. So maybe that has something to do with it, on top of money, on top of control, on top of them wanting to keep everything as pure as possible for themselves and not for the rest of us. And if they can lower our standard of living, then what happens when your standard of living is lowered and your hygiene practices are thrown out the window? Death and disease occur. So is this another depopulation eugenics program that they are trying to put in place so that they can have the dominion over the entire world and keep it as pure as their own bloodlines are? Is that what's going on? This is just me hypothesizing. I don't know. I could not find a reason as to why they would do this, but they are.
Well, they'd have you believe that they're actually securing water rights around the world, so people have access to clean water all the way around the world, and they are doing some of that. But it's just like crypto. While they're doing crypto, we are building the infrastructure for the CBDCs. So they're building infrastructures right now, and I think there is going to be a massive push to take over control, and water is going to be one of those leverages in which to do that. So
be tough,
right.
Be strong, say no.
Right.
When your municipalities are talking about taxing your water, increasing your water bill, asking you in the rural communities to decommission your well, you must stand up and you must say no.
Oh, this would be a great time to be an affiliate for Berkey Light, but we're not.
We're not.
we aren't. Get your Berkey Light down, because
Nope.
water. They're getting the water. Turn the water.
Okay, Alex.
Turn the frogs gay. Get your Berkey Light. Berkey Light. 20% off. Alex sent you.
No, you just got to say no. You've got to stand up. With all the billions of dollars they're making off of the sale of water, they 100% could be putting water to everybody who doesn't have water. We know they know how to create water now with their cloud seeding. So why aren't they doing that? We've got natives or indigenous communities, in the north of Canada that still don't have clean water to this day. If our government that was giving billions of dollars away to these pariah type organizations actually gave the money and put it into our own infrastructure, everyone here in Canada would have clean, fresh water.
Right. So, yeah. So a lot of this, you go through you would try to condense. Literally, if we read everything back to back, it'd be a month. So we try to condense all this stuff. And it sounds speculative, I know, but at the same time, the past is the best predictor of the future.
Exactly.
Have they done it with air? Nobody would have thought they could tax air, but they did it.
They did.
Right? So we know it's coming because it's a way bigger control mechanism than anything else. Because, if you're in a survival situation, you can survive. People look for food first, but you can survive, 3 days or 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Now, water, that's a big thing. You're not going to survive long unless you have access to water.
Correct.
Right.
And just so you know, our Canadian government is funding the UN's agenda. They are funding the, hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations that are hiding in the UN tree branches. And not only that, but our Canadian government is funding, was it Iraq?
Iraq, yeah.
Is funding the Iraq water conservation program, making sure that Iraq has water to give to their people who are less fortunate than you and I. Yet they're not funding the water programs here at home. It'd be nothing to running a pipeline right up to the Northern Territories and giving our Indigenous folks up there clean water. But no, they'd rather send the clean water to Iraq. Keep that in mind when the next election is called.
Yeah.
And it was our full government, not just the Liberal government, that voted on that. So.
Yeah, and don't forget, Mark Carney just announced his bid for leadership tonight. So getting tired of telling I told you so, but whatever. Yeah.
So I know water is not popular today. It will be popular 6 months to a year from now.
Yeah.
And
share this out in 6 months.
Exactly.
When it's relevant. Yeah.
When it's relevant. In the meantime, check out all the links that we've put in there. There are like a plethora of links that you could check out. There's so much that we didn't cover on the show because it's such a big, giant subject. And go to parlegis.info, or is it parlegis.info, and check out all of the bills that have to do with water right here in Canada.
Right.
So Canada is 100% on board with the UN agenda to tax you, take over all of the water rights, and to decommission water from your rural properties and throw all the water supply back into the government's hands.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to read them all, just go through 263 in light of what we've talked about tonight. You will see it right in there, set up and ready to go for control mechanisms over the Canadian people. Yeah. So with that,
have a great, it is Thursday. Have a great weekend. If you're not doing something to stand up for your countrymen, for the future of your children, then at least be making memories with your children because they're only young ones.
That's right. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're off to go help green the military. All right, everybody. Good night. We'll see you Monday.
Bye, guys.